officials, one from each county. Those are the things that I've done, have been doing, have been continuing to do while I serve in the Senate. So again, I will reiterate what Justin said because I think it's really important. I wish there were 2 Secretary of State positions, because I wish we both could win. But either way, I can guarantee you we are going to be much better at the keeper of the public trust than our Democrat opponent.
Yes, Michelle. It's you again, it's number
Getting our
1.
exercise this morning.
Same one, okay. What is your position on Common Core?
I have serious concerns with Common Core, and the impression that I have is that the federal government is trying to impose a one-size-fits-all mandate on the states. And just like cities and counties don't like when the state tries to do that to them, the federal government should not be doing that to the states. There are several Common Core bills, or I should say anti-Common Core bills, at the Capitol. And in a group I was speaking to last week, and I think it's very, very important that this group realizes it as well. You could put fancy titles on something or things that it will feel good, but a good lawmaker looks at what the bill actually does. And so, again, several Common Core bills down at the Capitol. I believe there's 9. Some of them aren't as well written as some of them are, as other ones are. I will tell you that one of the best Common Core bills was written by this gentleman right here, and I will let him explain that to you rather than steal his thunder. We had several votes on Common Core bills in the Senate, and I was a little disappointed when they kept saying that it was some Republicans that banded with Democrats to kill Common Core bills like we didn't care about the issue. I think it's more important that we care about what we pass, that it really actually works. And I think that I know that when you're voting on bills, it can't just be because it feels good or it sounds good. The bill actually has to work. And I'm hoping that before the end of the session, we have a Common Core bill that we get to vote on, or anti-Common Core bill that we get to vote on, that actually does something to fix the problem.
Before you sit down, I'm actually combining 2, so Justin, you'll be able to?
All right,
Okay, so,
double shot.
okay, so the first question was what can you, oh, no, it's not. What is your position on Common Core? There's another question that says, how do you stand on Agenda 21 Common Core? So if you want to speak to Agenda 21, awesome.
I'm certainly not the expert on Agenda 21. I do know you have the expert sitting here, and she's actually your senator. And I look to her for a lot of these, a lot of information on Agenda 21 because I know that's something she's really passionate about, and it's not something I follow as closely. Senator Burgess has had a number of bills over the years dealing with making sure that Agenda 21 is not infiltrating different levels of government in its policy. And I believe, are you asking me a question or Judy? Oh, well, anyways, Judy's, several of her bills I have supported in years past.
All right, I get a twofer, so I get more time. Okay, let me start with the last question first. How many of you, because it's so funny how, as those who are in the politics and others, we just believe that people understand all things. I promise I won't put you on the spot, but if you feel like you understand what Agenda 21 is, raise your hand. And again, I will not call on you, so don't worry. She said, actually, it's very small. Judy, you didn't have to even raise your hand. It's actually a smaller group probably than what, and I think that this is what Judy has worked on significantly, is bringing awareness to the issue, perhaps more than anything. Agenda, in 30 seconds, just so I don't lose all my time. This was a conference down in Rio de Janeiro, 1992. Was it 92? I think it was 92.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was 1992. And multiple ideas really that centered around sustainability. In my mind, that's what the conference really centered on, and propagated some pretty extreme ideas about how to, in the name of sustainability, protect our planet. And there are things that population growth and other things that come into play. So there are some very scary things. When you read the document, I think you would look at that and say, this is crazy. We shouldn't be doing this. This is for my first question. 30 seconds for my first question. Okay, good. I want to make sure I still have time to talk about education. So I support measures to eliminate or get rid of whatever influence Agenda 21 might have on our public policy. I believe it is bad for public policy. So question number one, done. Question number two. And I appreciate what Michelle said, because I will tell you that and she and I have been at a lot of different forums, and Michelle and I are really trying to lead by example on how a Republican primary should happen. And I say that because I pointed out she had a good bill last year about election issues. I don't have a problem saying she did a good thing. And I'm happy to hear she's saying that I have the best bill to deal with the Common Core issue, that I drafted that bill. It's House Bill 2316, and it did pass the Senate Education Committee this week. So the next step is for it to go to the floor. I'm trying to remember if it had an amendment on it. It did have an amendment, so I think it'll have to go to Cal. Judy, you guys are going to have to help out with this. My feeling on this bill was it was the scalpel approach to the Common Core issue. There are other bills that would deal with the issue once and for all. My feeling was, if those don't happen, I want to find some way, and again, this is the lawyer in me trying to scalpel my way into dealing with the root issues. And so what I dealt with in this bill were the privacy issues that have been such a big concern, and the funding issue of the federal government requiring that if we take their funds, we've got to take the strings that are attached to those funds. What my bill says is the Arizona Department of Education shall not apply for any federal grants that carry with it a requirement that we implement any particular set of standards or curriculum. And this gets to my base problem with education in the United States, and this is the Common Core issue, which is, some have said, well, Common Core is not a mandate. Frankly, in my mind, it really doesn't matter, because whether it's a mandate or whether it's a carrot out there that we really can't afford not to take, that's a problem. And so what I want to see our federal government do is give us back the money in a block grant from the very beginning. It shouldn't go there in the first place, but give us the money. Give us back our money for education. Let us manage it, and we will prove to you that we're able to do it more efficient and better, and our kids will do better. Briefer.
Interesting question. What can you do for the folks, and I'm assuming it's the residents of Arizona, as Secretary of State? So what can you do for us as Secretary of State?
In addition to obviously protecting your right to vote, and your voice in your vote, because that's really what we're talking about, right? When we're talking about fraud in the election, if somebody casts a vote that shouldn't be casting a vote, it just canceled yours out. And so what we can do is take steps to make sure that the integrity of the vote is at a very, very high level. And as I mentioned to you earlier, my background and experience should give you confidence that I'll be able to get in there and ask the hard questions. The red flags, how many of you think that, 40 registrations at a single address should cause you to maybe take a second look. Those are the types of things that and that one's an obvious one. So I think anybody would be able to look at that and say, we ought to take a look at that. But there are other red flags that pop up along the way that I think some very simple measures that we can do, that when registrations show up, and I mean with technology today, when Google Earth shows it's a vacant lot, maybe that's something we ought to follow up on. And I think that that's one thing that I can do. Number two, I believe that it's important that our Secretary of State work hand in hand with the governor's office, hopefully it's a Republican governor, but to really advance our economic opportunities in the state. We have one of the best economic environments. What we've done over the last few years at the Capitol, by the way, has gotten the attentions of Forbes magazine. We are #1 state in the country for entrepreneurship. We are projected over the next 10 years to be the #1 state for job growth. We've done a lot of awesome things. We need a cheerleader, somebody who could go out there and really do that. Now, the governor should be doing it too, but I think the Secretary of State should be the right hand of the governor on those issues. And so I think that those are the types of things that in the Secretary of State's office we can have a significant impact on moving Arizona forward.
Protecting the integrity of your vote is paramount, and that's a given, of course. Streamlining government and streamlining some of the ways that some of the different agencies interact. And one example that's a really easy fix is business filings. Some business filings happen at the Secretary of State's office, some happen at the Corporation Commission. Why would you do that to people coming to town? New business coming to town, and they've got 2 places to go instead of 1. They should have 1. Whichever one it is, they should have 1 place to go, 1-stop shop. So streamlining and making sure that things are more efficient is very important. The use of technology and making sure that things are more transparent, again, very important. Justin was mentioning about the vacant lots. The #1 address used on petitions, by the way, the #1 address used is 5555 North 7th Avenue. And we went and looked at that, and that was a Bashas' parking lot, by the way. There are things, and we actually are working on a bill this year that I hope sponsor, and hopefully it makes it all the way to the governor's office, where again, a lot of that stuff can be done online. We have a pilot program to allow people to sign petitions online. You can still sign them on paper too, but the ability to also do it online. That was just a pilot program that expires the end of this year. And so re-upping that and also making it more available to different offices. The days of paper, well, let's put it this way. You would not be able to use the address 5555 North 7th Avenue on an online system because it's going to know right away that that's not where someone who's registered to vote lives. So increasing transparency, enforcing accountability, streamlining government. We also hear from businesses that why don't they come to Arizona? Why do they pass us up? The #1 thing businesses want isn't give me's, isn't hand me, free money or big tax incentives. It's to be asked. And Justin's completely right, being an economic cheerleader for our state.
Michelle, I think you're up. Do you support Medicaid expansion? And it's got and Common Core, but I think you've spoken up on Common Core at this point.
Last year, when we had the Medicaid expansion issue in the Senate, I voted no on the Medicaid expansion amendments and on the final Medicaid expansion bill that was in the budget. Last year was, and like I said, I've been down there 12 years, but last year was one of the oddest and kind of hurtful things that I've seen down there when it came time for the budget. When the governor called a special session and it was almost like everybody was duped. whatever we were working on was just done and scrapped. And what a special session is it's only, you only are able to focus on one topic or whatever the governor calls. And she called for this to be a Medicaid expansion special session for the budget, and it was just rammed through. We weren't allowed to do any amendments. We weren't allowed to speak. Well, we could speak, but nobody would answer questions. It was something and I've participated in all different kinds of budgets, some good, some bad, some on the right sides of the issues and some on the wrong side of the issues, but that was nothing like I had seen. And not only the Medicaid expansion I have a problem with, the two hospitals that get hurt the most by it happen to be in my district, by the way, Scottsdale and Fountain Hills. They were very opposed to it. But it wasn't just the expansion, it was the way it was done that I thought was pretty horrific. And it wasn't the way that I think that you want to see government work. I'm hoping that all of that is behind us and that we'll behave a little more civil this budget cycle, and it looks like we're going to. But I'm worried about the Medicaid expansion, that it's unsustainable. It's sustainable for the next several years. I hope I'm wrong when I say that, but I'm very worried that what we've done is very unsustainable.
I'm glad Michelle used the word sustainable because it's funny, and Judy, I've been saying this, we let the left hijack that word and then let them use it for their purposes. We ought to turn it right back around on them and say, you want sustainability? Well, that's really what we stand for. We stand for sustainability, a sustainable government, and we are living so far beyond our means that it's not sustainable. And when you look at what is driving our federal deficit, did you know that Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and defense spending, those items, you call them the big three, because Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and defense spending, which, look, we understand the need for defense spending. But those three items run us a deficit every year. If you were to cut out every other penny of federal spending, we would still be in the hole. So where's our problem? Our problem are in those areas of spending. There are things that can be done in Social Security, things we've talked about. Certainly, we've got to keep the promise to those who are relying on it. I mean, I think that that's exactly what we have to do. But my generation, the ones who are the 10 under 40, we've got to deal with that and start looking at some things to make that a sustainable program, again, sustainable going forward. But Medicare, Medicaid is one of the bigger problems, and it is a component of the Obamacare plan, which is, hey, have the states expand their Medicaid population. That way, that's how we're going to cover this group of people. I can tell you that last week, I found out that a woman quit her job at CVS because she lost her health care plan because it didn't meet the Obamacare mandates, and rather than go on her husband's plan, it was more expensive to do that than to quit her job and go on to Medicaid. And that's what we are encouraging with the expansion of Medicaid and frankly the Obamacare plan all the way around. So my feeling is long-term health requires that we do not take steps, we do not do things where there's no end game. $500 million to $1 billion of extra cost to the state, the Medicaid expansion after 2018. So therefore, I voted no also. I got so much more to say about that. Oh, yeah. I'm up. So can I keep talking about it?
Okay, this is the actual last written question.
All right.
Since it is federal government job to enforce border security, how would you or something improve border security? How would you or
Would you or could? How would you or could?
If
How
I
would
may
or
clarify.
could? How would you or
Because
could
you
you?
can't read my writing. How would you, as a state government, a Secretary of State or the Governor of the state, improve border security? Since it's the federal government's primary job.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so candidly, in this office, it's going to be pretty difficult to have really much influence at all over that. Now, if again, as 4 of the last 8 have moved on, I believe the governor's office does have significant influence. But maybe we could try to increase our influence a little bit. The way you do that, I believe, is working with some of our congressmen and our senators, because the real issue, and I grew up in Yuma. I graduated from high school in Yuma, Arizona. I grew up in a border community. I lived firsthand the issues of a border community. I understand. Now, did you also know that Yuma is the only sector of the border in Arizona where we actually have operational controls? We're over 90% operational. More than 90% of illegal crossings in the Yuma sector are detected. Now, what we do with those detections, that is a federal government issue that we simply are going to have to continue to work with our federal government so that they don't go into our jails. How many of you saw Sheriff Joe's report recently? In and out of our jails. They're getting deported, we think, and then they're ending up back in our jails. What is ICE doing with those people? This is a major federal government problem that I wish we could have more control over, but what I think we can do is work with those leaders to make sure that they know we can get operational control of the border. We've done it in Yuma. We need to extend it. Once we do that, we're going to have a much easier time having a logical discussion about how then to take the next steps. But you can't have that until you have that operational control, and it is possible. And I've lived it, and I can be a voice for that, but it really is going to take a monumental effort outside of the Secretary of State's office, frankly outside of the governor's office in the state. It's going to require massive pressure on our federal leaders to get them to understand how much of a priority this is.
My colleague is right, there's a very obvious solution. When we have an area in our state where the border security is working fairly well, why aren't we emulating that in other areas of the state? The Yuma sector is fairly secure, more secure than some of the areas down south where you can't be safe in if you venture into those areas. So the governor's office, and again, the Secretary of State's office is very limited in what they can do. However, they can make sure, the Secretary of State should be making sure that those people aren't voting if they do end up here. So closing and sealing that border, and it's very interesting, some of the new technologies, and I use the word technologies, and some of them, again, some work and some don't. There was a great demonstration down at the Capitol on a virtual fence that wasn't like this mega $1 million disaster that contract that was put out by the federal government. It was really interesting. It was these towers that can spot where people are at, and then you can send your troops, generally limited number of troops, to intercept those people. And common sense solutions like that, and why they haven't been put into place. Some of it is the federal government's purview, but some of it is the state's purview. That is something that I think the next governor should, again, as I mentioned earlier, really be banging the drum on, is making sure that, yes, you have to work with the federal government and work with our congressional delegation, but working hand in hand with them to make sure that we put whatever we need to put down there to make it secure. Copy what what is working in Yuma. Copy what is working in parts of Texas, where they seem to have a very big handle on it, and use some of this new technology that we have to make sure that, stuff that doesn't need to be a really big, thick wall and super expensive. There's a lot of different options out there. I'm glad that people are still focused on that.
Okay, like I said, that's the last of the written questions. I'm just curious, we've had some discussions in this club with other speakers about what is going on in the Republican Party, especially with candidates, basically shooting at each other. And it makes us look like a party in disarray. I'd be interested in your thoughts on what we can do better as Republicans and candidates to make sure that we're able to get the message across without shooting each other in the foot.
I can speak to this. If you'll go to YouTube, and if you go CPAC 2014 Justin Pierce, you'll pull open my speech. The one I told you about that I gave between Governor Chris Christie and Governor Bobby Jindal. My message was that exact issue, that I grew up under the tutelage of President Ronald Reagan. I was 6 when he took office, and I won't repeat my speech for you, but I talked about the fact that he had a special way of conveying conservatism in an uplifting, positive way, and it was a way of uniting. I think we do have a lot of folks in our party that unfortunately use our message to divide when they don't need to. I'd like to see us use our message like Reagan did to unite our party. And again, go online, you'll see, I mean, it's CPAC, actually C-SPAN has it too because they covered it. Mine wasn't the only message it was interesting. I did not go to CPAC and was not told, hey, you're going to have 6 minutes and speak on something about this. I was not told what to speak about, which, by the way, was kind of difficult when I was trying to put something together. I'm thinking, what am I going to say on the national stage? It was almost uncanny. If you watch the speeches from Thursday, in fact, Governor Christie, right before me, he ended by saying, we don't get to govern if we don't win elections. And he talked about how important it was that we come together. There was a massive message of uniting. Now, I think that here's how you do it. Michelle and I don't have to tell you all the terrible things about Michelle. I like Michelle. She's a good person. There are some policy issues where we will probably disagree. So what? But we'll talk about those, and we can do that respectfully. I don't have to attack Michelle. She doesn't have to attack me to tell you why we're the most qualified candidate for the job. I believe I'm the most qualified. She believes she's the most qualified. You'll make that decision, and that's great. We can lead by example that way. I'm getting the stop sign, so I'll stop. But I can't emphasize this enough, that Terry Goddard will be so horrible for this office, and it needs to be one of us.
Respect is key, and the biggest thing that I'm worried about in the way that candidates act and also the way some of the party operatives act, and even some groups who disagree with folks and find anger is the tool to lash out. The biggest thing I worry about is that we are not attracting the generation behind me to our party. They want absolutely nothing to do with us. They were seen as uncaring, we're seen as all sorts of, we don't like this, or this. The fact is that Republicans are right on so many messages. So our message is right. Perhaps the messengers need to be toned down a little bit. I've said this to Justin before, it's a joke when we go into forums and stuff. Present company excluded, of course. But people go to NASCAR because they want to see car crashes. That's the fun part about NASCAR. Tangled up, watching them go around in a circle isn't nearly as exciting. And sometimes I feel like when we go, and again, present company excluded, but this group, when we go places, it's a setup to almost see that car crash. To see how people can throw things at each other, to see how much red meat people can throw into the audience that's rhetoric that doesn't really say anything. And then, every once in a while, I think you get folks like Justin and I who come and answer your questions. And not everyone in this room is going to agree with me on everything I've done. I have a 12-year voting record. I can guarantee you'll find a lot in it that you like and some things that you don't like. But it's respect. And it's being the kind of people that will attract others to want to be like us. We are right on the message. We just need to watch the messengers that we put out there.
Okay, we do have a standing mic, so if anybody has thought of anything with these other questions, then just go to the mic, and if there's multiples, just line up. And
move through these quicker?
Pat, well, obviously, it depends on the question. Let's see. We can take, yeah, the three, so if we go, yeah, a minute, let's see.
Both of you have really answered the question regarding protecting our rights in the voting. What do you think about early voting? I understand that early voting, there are a lot of problems with that, and yet we as a PC, were, at least during 2012, when I was director of Sun City West PCs, we pushed for early voting because of the seniors. Many of them were ill and could not get out. But then I find out later that there's a lot of problems with that. What's your word on early voting? Should we do it? Yes or no?
Yes, we should continue to do it. And very briefly, early voting has its drawbacks, and there are things that we've found that can be fixed. But the number one thing it has done is encourage people to vote who wouldn't normally otherwise, other Republicans. When we look at the rolls, it has increased voter participation in astronomical ways and shouldn't just be scrapped. The key is making sure that our early voting system is secure. And it's not hard to do. Seems to be hard to get some of the bills we've tried to put through out, but it isn't hard. It's just one man, one woman, one vote. It's really simple. And as long as we adhere to that, early voting can be very secure and very good for getting, like I said, some of those other people who maybe aren't as passionate as you as I to the polls.
And I agree, the issue is just making sure that it's secure, even if you wanted to back off of it, which is interesting. This focus group I did last night, you'll be very interested to hear that it was almost split down the middle on the issue of, people felt like this was a good thing, and then there about half the people now feel like we need to go back to going to the polls on election day that day. It's very interesting how people have come out on this, but I think that my guess is the reason that half has gone the direction of we need to go back to the voting day, going to the polls, is the issue of that ballot not being secure. That if you had better feeling that that ballot was secure and it wasn't being messed with by somebody else, you probably wouldn't have as many concerns as you have about the early balloting. So I think that really is the key. We're not going to roll back early balloting, but I think we can do some things to make sure that it is secure.
Are they doing something about trying to secure it?
So that's a second question. I'll deal with it really quick.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I'll deal with it really quick. And Michelle, I think we agree on this one. The permanent early voting list is a problem. That's one of the things that needs to be addressed. And it's because we've got ballots now. It's a permanent, it's called permanent. It's permanent. And you can't ever get off that thing. And even when you die or when things happen. So we've got to take some common sense measures to clean up the permanent early voting list. And that is one of the things I think that will make that very helpful.
I'll just add, that's actually a bill that I ran last year and would very much fix the problem if we could get it through, which we will.
Another good bill.
What is your opinion on all mail ballots? That there's no polling places except for certain conditions or ADA or whatever to
I'm
help.
sorry, when you said all mail, I'm like, what about?
M-A-I-L.
I support women voting, just so you know. Very strong supporter.
There's always going to be a need or a place for an actual polling place, an actual polling location. And so I tend to be very skeptical of an all mail